Hey guys, yeah, we're back looking at the Admiral TV. I'll tell you why. I feel like I did my viewers a bit of a disservice because I was getting frustrated working on this set and I kind of rushed through the final presentation. So, I want to address that in this episode. So I'd mentioned a few things that, oh, I just need to do this, I just need to do that. I thought I'd actually show you what I'm talking about. And also there are one or two issues that came up that I didn't even bother mentioning. One goes way back to the first episode, which is this. There's a focus pin. The wire had broken off of the CRT socket. Should be going there. And they had soldered a wire directly to the CRT pin. I didn't even have it connected. I just had it floating when I was showing you this set working. Let's take care of that. So I want to clean off the remains of the solder that's on here. And, well, while I was installing this chassis for the very last time, this wire broke off. Video wire. And I just shoved it back in there to get an image, and then I took that last segment showing the set working. Let's do a better job with that. So basically, I'm going to be replacing the socket. I could try repairing it maybe. It's riveted together, so I would need to drill or otherwise extract those rivets, and then I could probably remove the stump of the wire that broke off, strip this, solder it on, but I think it might be easier to install a new socket, especially if I can find the type that does open up with maybe some little screws or something. Otherwise, God, I hate to see it. I hate to say it, but I could pull the chassis out again. Because what I don't want to do is splice in every one of these wires. So say I got a socket I salvaged from another set. I could cut the leads off so they're about 6 inches long, cut this one off, and do 6 splices, and splice all these wires in. A little ugly. Alright, what else? Well, if you look close, when I last showed the set playing, there were 1 or 2 vertical bars in the image. Pretty sure those are horizontal drive lines. So horizontal drive control, it's a variable capacitor down in here. I did not adjust that. In some sets, like especially color sets, you want to adjust that drive so that there's minimum current going through the horizontal output tube to extend the life of the flyback. I've never really heard that talked about with early black and white sets. They typically in the service info say to adjust the drive control so you get best linearity and you don't see those drive lines. So I'll review the service literature, but I'm pretty sure that's what it says for this set as well. So I'll see what I can do about that. And there was also a little bit of hum in the audio. Now, in the service literature, they refer to the top coil, and this is the hum control. Really, it's the ratio detector. And I want to try tweaking that a little bit so I can minimize the hum. And also tweak the channel selector slugs from the front of the set. And finally, actually do what I keep talking about, which is to take the glass off the front of the set and clean it properly. So, that's what we're in store for with this segment. Alright, now let's tackle something that should be pretty straightforward, which is cleaning the front. First thing, pull off the knobs. So, this whole front is a sheet of safety glass. It's there to protect the viewer or anybody nearby in case a picture tube implodes. These early type of picture tubes don't have any inherent protection. They don't have tension bands, they don't have bonded safety glass to the front. It's nothing, it's just glass. And if you were to, like, say the front of it got scratched, or there was a flaw in it, or something got whacked, the cabinet got whacked hard, TV fell over, implode, and the glass tends to, well, come out the front. So that's why they put the safety glass here. Personally, I've never had a picture tube implode on me, but I have certainly heard tales from other folks who have. One guy, for example, had some picture tubes he was going to dispose of because they didn't have good emissions anymore, but they still had a vacuum, and he had them like on his concrete patio face down, and I guess he pushed them or something, and the front of them got scored, which weakened the glass, and one of them imploded, and he got hurt. Also, I've heard guys who were carrying them by the neck, loose outside the set. And while that's the most fragile part of the picture tube, you should not do that, and the neck snaps off, picture tube implodes, glass goes flying. But we're not going to worry about that right now, because that's not going to happen to me. So next, what I want to do is I want to get this off. So how do you get this off? Well, you don't have to take everything out of the back of the set. They've got this brass trim up here and there. There's a screw here and a screw here and one there. And I think that's it. They're little Phillips screws. So let's see if I can find a screwdriver and try getting them out. And then the whole piece of glass should just come right out. There we go. And I can tell it's dirty. Both the front of the glass picture tube and the inside of this. High voltage tends to attract small particulates in the air, and they accumulate on the glass surfaces. Not to mention cigarette, nicotine tar. Alright, last screw out. Yeah, there was one screw missing. I thought it was odd that there were only 3 screws. There should be 4. It's probably way back when somebody took this off and never replaced it. So, and you lift up a little bit. Boy, oh my God, is that heavy and filthy. You can feel it too, as it's actually really built up on there. So, clean that off, and whew, it's heavy because I think it's 2 pieces of glass with maybe plastic in between, but geez, that's gotta be about 10 pounds, maybe more. And see the junk on the CRT as well. And I can also clean this, which is just plastic. So there it is. So if one ever needed to replace the picture tube, you actually can, you do it from the front. There are 4 bolts. You loosen them up, loosens up this band around it, and pull it out the front. Oh yeah. So, what to clean it with? Typically, the owner's manual on these sets would say to use a damp rag, but that's not going to cut it. There's too much crud built up. So, I'm going to use, of course, the world's best glass cleaner. I can't vouch for that, but the stuff works quite well. I like it. It's an aerosol can rather than the usual squeeze trigger. Typically, you don't want to just spray this because then you're going to get it into the set and moisture, and you could promote some corrosion. So, spray it onto the cloth. In this case, I'm using a nice soft microfiber cloth. Some nice foaming action on there, and do that. This is ammonia base, so it will evaporate. I don't know. It is ammonia free, sorry. I mean, it's got some alcohol in it. So it will evaporate pretty well. And yikes. So, as bright as that picture may have looked, it's going to look a whole lot nicer with all this cleaned off. I'll do the same to the safety glass. Find a clean section on this cloth and go over it again. Wow, maybe a third application is in order. And now for the safety glass. You can see all the streaks from where I had run my finger over it earlier. Yeah, it's nasty. It's sticky too. It's so bad I'm going to use my dirty rag for the first pass just to start getting some of this gunk off, and I'll get a clean one. The little touches, you know, that really complete a project, I think. Yeah, it's time consuming, it's tedious. I feel like on some of these projects, actually getting the thing running is the easiest part. All this cosmetic stuff, all the tweaking and fine tuning and adjusting the picture. Oh man, doing an alignment, that can really take up a lot of time. But in the end, if it's a set that you really care about, you really want to show off, I think it's worth it. If you just want to have an old TV, just turn on and say, hey, everybody look at an old TV, well then, I suppose it's not quite so important. But if you want it to be a showcase in your man cave or whatnot, take the time. Most of it off that side. Over. In this case, I don't care. I'll spray it directly on it because, well, there's no electronics nearby to get any moisture on them. Time for a clean cloth. Well, I had to do about 4 passes on each side, but boy, that really made a big difference. I hope the camera can pick that up. Alright, what next? Well, let's carry on with the cosmetic stuff. So how about the knobs? They're in pretty decent shape, but as is typical of knobs that have knurled sides, dirt and debris collect in the grooves. I've had pretty good luck in the past soaking knobs in some warm soapy water, like dish detergent, and let it sit for maybe an hour or so, and then take a toothbrush and scrub it out. These have inserts that, it's hard to say. It might be metallized plastic, or could be solid brass, or it could be brass plated tin or something like that. If I knew it was solid brass, I wouldn't hesitate to get some simichrome or similar metal polish and polish them up. But I suspect these are plated. It's kind of worn through in some areas, and if I try polishing this up, it's going to go right down to the gray base metal. So I think just a light cleaning is going to be good for that. And the outer knobs, again, light cleaning. These may well have been brass plated at some point, and it's completely gone. Here they are after soaking in some warm dish detergent for about half an hour and then being scrubbed lightly with a toothbrush. Got all the dirt out of the grooves, and the metal inserts looking a little bit better. Here are the outer knobs. Alright, next let's tackle that damaged CRT socket. So, I dug up a few options, stuff I've salvaged over the years. Probably the simplest, most straightforward way to get these is to salvage them from brighteners. These show up for sale all the time on eBay, and God from the seller doesn't really even know what they are. So, what these are for is picture tubes that get weak. You put this in between the CRT and the socket that connects to it, and there's a auto transformer in here to boost the filament voltage. Basically, you run the CRT filament hotter to squeeze some more life out of it. So I could salvage these, but these have rivets as well. Also, this is a universal one, and I kind of like to hang on to this one. Can do series or parallel. Some of these also act as isolation ones, and those ones are especially handy because if you ever find a CRT that's got a heater cathode short, an isolating type one that actually doesn't boost the voltage but it's just a 1-to-1 ratio, those are kind of hard to find but also very handy. But I could use these, so I could cut the wires off and splice them in like I mentioned. So let's see what else I got. These are ones that I cut out of sets that got scrapped out, I think. These also all have rivets. And rivets. Here's one that, well, it's only half, and it's actually fairly common because although there is room for 12 pins on the picture tube base, this is a standard for pretty much every magnetically deflected CRT from the late 40s to the 50s. I think they call it a duodecal, meaning it's 10 plus 2, so 12 pins. But on most CRTs, only 5 of them are used. 2 for filament, 1 for cathode, 1 for G1, 1 for G2. Until you get into somewhat newer ones that have electrostatic focus. And that's what the pin on the opposite side is for. So this one does electrostatic focus. So I kind of need one of these. Or, what they did on some of these is they would use a half socket like this, and there'd be a piece of curved metal that would short between this pin and either that pin or that pin, whichever would give you the sharpest focus. Let's see, this guy, rivets, kind of crusty, and last one, this one has screws, but it doesn't have the focus pin. Although I can see inside, it looks like there is some metal on just these two, but not on these. So I think it does actually have metal contact for the focus, so I could unscrew this, undo these wires, and connect up all the existing wires on that set. So this is one possibility. Another possibility is to simply take one of these and drill out the rivets and replace them with small screws. Kind of annoying. Well, I was going to say there's 4 you got to take out on this one, but no. I think just the two outer ones, and then these two would stay because they're just holding the wafers together. So I think I'll go through these and dig up the nicest looking one that has rivets and try drilling the rivets out. Let's see what I can do. The nice thing about these brighteners is a lot of the ones you see for sale have never been used, so the socket's pretty pristine, whereas the ones I took out of sets, some of them are pretty grungy. So I will take the best one I can find out of this mix here. A titanium drill bit made quick work of the rivets, and here's what's inside. So a little desoldering, get those wires off, clean out the holes, and remove the old CRT socket from the set, and clean and dress the leads, and remount this on there, and then dig up a couple small screws and locking washers and nuts, and should be in business. I don't think this thing's ever been used. Very pristine looking. Okay, here's that new CRT socket wired in. It wasn't too difficult. So the one interesting thing on this is this guy, pin 6. So earlier CRTs use something called magnetic focus. And in addition to the yoke, behind that there'd be another coil right about here. It would just be an electromagnet. And there'd be a rheostat in series with it to vary the current through it, and that'd be your focus control. A few years later came electrostatic focus CRTs. I don't know the exact physics of how it works, but I believe it's a voltage is applied to one of the gun elements in here, and it works very similar to the way an optical focus assembly works. But the curious thing about it is they'd never hook it up to a potentiometer where you could vary the voltage on it. Every case I've seen, it's attached to either ground or B plus or B plus plus. And you'll see that here. It's very typical to see on schematics like this, where they say connect jumper from pin 6 to pin 2 or 10 for best focus. Pin 2 is 0 volts, ground. Pin 10 is the B++, or G2 on the CRT. And you choose whichever one gives you better focus, and that's that. No focus control. So another thing you commonly see is those pins they mentioned to short this to. That's this guy, and that's this guy, which are equal distance apart. So instead of having a wire come off here that you connect to something in the set, often you'll just see a piece of metal that shorts either these two pins or these two pins, and you can remove it and install it this way or install it this way. So I could have done that, except I don't have any spare ones lying around. So what I did do for now is I just tacked it to this metal bracket here, which is ground. I'm not honestly sure, other than taking this wire and shorting it over to here, where I could get at that 440 volt. But it seems to be pretty good focus like this. Alright, so I just need to dig up a couple small screws and nuts and put that guy on. Nice, neat job. A few other things. So this is a yoke. There's a wing nut here that I just secured. You loosen that up, and that's the only thing that holds this in place. And it's got a slot in it, which means you can rotate the yoke a little bit like this, and that's how you level the picture. So you put something like a crosshatch pattern up on the CRT and do this to make sure the picture is correctly oriented vertically and horizontally. So about all that's left to do back here is I'll have to take this off and the ion trap magnet, which is this guy here, and put on the centering rings, which honestly I don't think I really need to bother with, because the picture seems to be pretty darn well centered as is. But I'll put it on for the sake of it, just because it's will complete the project. So that is this guy. I need to refer to my notes to see exactly where those springs hook onto. There's 3 of them. The other 2 came loose. I know they hook somewhere into these holes in the chassis. I'm not sure exactly where. So I'm not sure it really matters. I just don't want it to be in the way of anything. Then I need to secure this control harness. Here it is back together with the clean glass and knobs. Got it turned on. And I still have some interference bands like before, but they're not as noticeable. So I think still might be an issue with truss lead. Now, I'll show you what I mean in a moment.
I'm taking my hand away now. Don't make a sound.
So, 2 things to make note of. When we saw this picture just now, it didn't really seem to have that sparkly interference that I saw up on the workbench. Even though I'm using an over-the-air converter box, the same one I had trouble with before. Which has got me thinking that's because now the set's inside, essentially a Faraday cage. It's inside of a shielded metal box, which is probably blocking any noise radiating from this from getting into the set. So I think once this is all together, put the back on, using a set-top box like this will work just fine. And as far as the interference bars, so initially it seemed like they went away when I did a better job of grounding the CRT, and that may be part of it, but they're still there a little bit. But earlier they weren't. One difference is right now there's this control harness here that needs to get mounted up on the side of the cabinet. Having it dangling like this might be causing problems. Is that noise seems to be related to the vertical, and one of the controls in here is vertical hold, so possibly that. Another possibility is these wires. So I don't know exactly how to route some of these wires. So for example, here's the power coming in. Let me disconnect this so I don't shock myself. So main AC coming in here and then goes through a hole in here to stuff. I don't know exactly where to put these wires. So they could go over here. They can go over here. I don't want them to, and I don't want them to get right next to anything that gets too hot. Like this is the main rectifier here. You see they put a heat shield in here, and there's a shield around that, which is a vertical output tube. But since that noise seems to be related to 60 hertz, I'm kind of looking for sources of 60 hertz noise. Well, the main power input's certainly one of them, and it's not shielded or anything. Also, this stuff. So this is the video wire. So notice it's routed separately from the others. So I've tried moving that around a little bit. See if that makes any difference. There's also this spring thing, hoop here, which I think is meant for the wires going to the CRT. I'm not sure. Maybe only this one should be in there. Again, I gotta look at my original photos, but even then, I don't know that that's necessarily the whole picture because the set's, I'm sure, been worked on before over the years. Well, I know it has because somebody had like replaced that resistor that had blown out over here. So who's to say that they put the leads back right? Another thing is the speaker. Speaker plug goes from here. The speaker's all the way over here. We got these 2 wires. Where the heck should they go? Up here we got a filter choke, vertical output transformer, obviously the CRT, and then the IS stuff over here. And then these wires, I could route it down around the flyback and between the heat shield and over to here. Or like now I've got it over the top, but should I kind of stick it behind a filter choke? Or in front, down here? I mean, often in these sets they would have kind of like, well, loops or something to kind of secure the wire down like that. But in this case, I'm not sure. But at least this I know. This needs to go up and it gets mounted to the side, way back up in there. So I'll do that first. Here's an example of why I cannot recommend highly enough that you get some sort of device that can take photos, be it a smartphone, a camera, Polaroid, whatever, something that you can take reference photos so as you take something apart so you know how to put it back together again. You can't rely on the service info. It's not going to tell you all the details. So, for example, here is the speaker wire. So now I can see it goes up and around. Now this is assuming that whoever had done work on this before put them back properly. But, you know, that's better than just guessing. And here's a good shot at the whole thing. So I can see the CRT wires come down here, loop around kind of, and that one yellow wire. She looks like it's laced to the speaker wires. And then it goes down. I can see how the AC wires are routed around. You can also get a sense of how everything was positioned, like that yoke, mounting flange, centering magnets, so on. It's a good shot. So the springs, looks like this one is missing, they just hook around through the hole in the chassis and then onto that cardboard. So see, that's how I knew where to put the ion trap magnet. And another good shot of the speaker. And there is a little bit of a metal tab thing sticking up that should be hooking around the wires. So, yeah, I can see it right here. See, I totally missed that. These wires should be hooked underneath that. At least I've got the speaker oriented correctly with the transformer going up that way. All that stuff can make a difference when it comes to interference. So the speaker wire should be up behind here. I need to take these CRT wires and I think do a little bit of lacing. So here's that scrap of cloth I saw in the photo. I think this is supposed to be kind of down and sort of over that way. And these should be laced together. Remnants of something that was holding the wires together. Everything's kind of falling apart over time. So I'm going to go through these reference photos and get everything hooked back up as close to I see as possible, and then fire this set up again. Well, I should have remembered this from when I took the set apart. That's the problem with letting a project linger for so long. Two of these springs tore through. This is just cardboard. And yeah. And this third one is not hanging on by much. So if I want to reuse this, I am going to have to glue and clamp and maybe reinforce that with something. So the work continues. Here is the rebuilt, reinforced centering magnet assembly reinstalled. I diluted wood glue and soaked it in to this material and then clamped it, which both made it much stronger and flattened it out. But even so, a couple of these ears were starting to get a little bit dug into by the spring, so I put a metal washer on here. I'm not concerned about that metal interacting with this magnet at all. This is a pretty weak magnet. This one was completely torn out, so I took two sheets of some really tough material. I'm not sure exactly what it is. It's like really tough cardboard, I guess you could say, or really thick tough paper maybe is a better way to describe it. And I cut off the remains of the torn out ear and put in some hardwood, glued it, clamped it, drilled it, and that's going to hold up a long time, I think. Next, I want to reinstall this control assembly, finish dressing all the leads, like I got the speaker down here, and then power this back up and see where things stand. Also, I dug out a mirror, so I'll set that up somewhere so I can see the front of the set while I make adjustments from the back side, using my test pattern generator as a signal source. I decided to leave the control harness hanging loose because I want to see what effect it has on the picture as I move it around. Otherwise, I've got everything set up pretty well. I've got my test pattern generator set up, and I've got a rather large mirror in front of the set, which makes a world of difference when it comes to setting up. So, centering magnets. The way these work is two slightly magnetized rings, and you can move these ears. You can move them closer together, further apart. So I'm just moving one of them, and as I do, I think you can see it moves the picture around. Now, all of this stuff interacts with each other. Horizontal hold, vertical hold, even the line voltage. So you can get it set up absolutely perfect, but then you move this to another house and the line voltage is different by a few volts. It'll affect the picture. Why? No voltage regulation in these sets. You get more voltage, you tend to get more height and width. Also, the vertical and horizontal hold can affect it a little bit. So here, for example, here's the vertical hold. I adjust it a little bit, and it changes the position of the picture a little bit. Now, it shouldn't do it much, but it does. Just if you get it really in the center of the range, the vertical is pretty solid. But if I get it kind of at one end, I can move the picture down a little bit. Horizontal hold. Well, the set actually doesn't really have one, it's got the dual diode, but it does have horizontal frequency. And if I tweak the horizontal frequency control, it'll stay locked, but the picture moves back and forth. Same if I adjust the horizontal drive. Also, there's an ion trap magnet on here you adjust for maximum brightness, but if I move it a little bit, the picture still stays pretty bright, but it also moves around. My point with all of this is, you can go nuts trying to set up a set perfectly. So you kind of try to strike a balance of looking pretty good. So one thing that's pretty typical, you make the width and height a little bit so it goes off the screen, and then get the image kind of in the center. So if some of the controls fluctuate, line voltage fluctuates a little bit, you're not going to see an area of the CRT where there's no image. And notice the interference is definitely still there with test pattern generator, so it's definitely not the converter box. It's unplugged, it's disconnected right now. Could it be something else in the house? Maybe. I know people also often say fluorescent lighting or LED lighting can be affecting it. Maybe. I'll turn off all the lights in the house and to see. And I'll try now moving this control harness around. And I don't think it's having a huge effect. And I'm also going to try moving around the video lead. Again, not much effect. Alright, so I'm going to put down the camera so you guys can get a good image of the screen. And I'm going to adjust all this stuff back here with different test patterns, like the crosshatch, and try to get the best linearity, best centering, best brightness, all that good stuff. First thing I'm going to do is turn the volume down so we don't go crazy. That's better. Now the next thing I'm going to do is the ion trap magnet. So I'm going to go to a different test pattern, one that shows more stuff. I'll go with that. And I want to turn the brightness down. And kill the lighting a bit. I want to move that magnet around so I get the brightest image. So the dimmer I make things, the dimmer I set the brightness, it makes it easier to see. So like right now the trap magnet is way off because I don't really see anything. I'm starting to see some lines. And notice too, it's moving the image all around the screen. So that's another way to affect the centering as well. That's why I'm doing this first. I think that's pretty good there. Notice you also get a bit of a pincushion effect around the edges. Not something you can really correct with these sets. Unlike later color sets that had magnets all around and pincushion control, not so much with these. What you can do is manipulate the yoke a little bit and the centering magnets a little bit. And it's not unheard of for somebody to take a little magnet and glue it somewhere or attach it somewhere. Later Predictas did that. They actually had a couple adjustable magnets on the yoke, and they had one kind of off to the side that you could, on a flexible metal shaft that you could manipulate. Alright, I think the trap magnet's pretty good there, so what I want to do now is work on the centering for that. Oh no, let's do linearity first, which is pretty good as is horizontally. It's a little squished maybe on the left, and it's a little stretched. It's a little bit tricky. It's a little stretched on both the top and bottom, so again, it's, you gotta kind of do a compromise. Vertical tends to be the biggest pain because of the reasons I already mentioned, but also components can affect it, like the vertical output tube. So if all else fails with adjusting controls, just linearity, and you can't just get the linearity right, try swapping the vertical output tube. So this is the height. I got way too much height. Not too little, because it's off the screen. See, that's weird. It's pretty good up until the very top, and it gets really stretched out. Let's see what the linearity control can do about that. And that's another issue. Tends to be when you adjust the other vertical stuff, then the hold might start to go out. It's a little better, but now we lost height, so let's see if we can get some height back. And I think it's a bit off center, it's a bit off the bottom now, so let's try the centering control. That's looking better. I'm adjusting the ion trap magnet a little bit. See how that definitely affects the image. So I'm trying to get best brightness and not have it squished up top like it is now. So much easier on later sets that are Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. There were early sets that were aluminized too. I got a 1947 GE that's got an aluminized CRT in it. So I'll just say it's so much easier in sets that don't have an ion trap magnet. Just don't have to do any of this. And if they're auto-focusing, even better, because when they have a focus control, focus magnet, that's yet another factor you have to contend with. Alright, I'm going to adjust the horizontal drive control now. Let's see what that does for us. And it has a subtle effect on the horizontal linearity. But it's not consistent across the image because of the way this stuff works, which I'm not going to get into right now. That's a subject for an entire video on its own, is how a flyback circuit works, but notice how it is affecting it right in the middle. And this set doesn't have a width control. There are ways you can adjust the width, but this one doesn't have a specific control. It's a little stretched out on the right. I'm not crazy about that. That would be another case of perhaps I could swap the horizontal output tube, but I've already gone through such headaches trying to get that with sufficient high voltage, I'm inclined not to do it. Now, another thing you can do while you're doing this is monitor the cathode current through the horizontal output tube. It's especially critical on color sets. Sometimes they even call this the efficiency control, because you want all these tuned circuits to work in concert so you have the least amount of current going through the flyback windings. Generally don't see that talked about in early black and white sets so much, but if there's a cathode resistor you can get at, you can monitor the voltage across that, do a little bit of Ohm's law and figure out the current flow through it. Or if you've got one of these handy devices, if you have one of these devices I talked about a while ago, these have detachable sockets. You insert this between the horizontal output tube and its socket. It's got a lead on here and it's got a current meter on it, so you can monitor the current through your horizontal output tube. I don't see that talked about much in the service info for black and white sets. They typically say to adjust it for best width, linearity, and high voltage, which I think is about as good as it's going to get right now. So let's go back to centering now and linearity. So that circle isn't quite right. So I thought this set's got more width than it does height. And since I don't really have a width control, I'm going to increase the height a bit. Maybe tweak the linearity a bit more. Let's get that circle back up there. It's a little bit bigger on the bottom than the top, maybe. It's a pretty decent circle. How about the centering? Oh, clearly the centering's off. Let's see what we can do about that. I'll get it over to the right some more. Maybe down a little. That's not too bad. Now we'll go back to the crosshatch. It's not perfect, but again, it never will be. You can go crazy working on that. This is what they call a burst pattern, and it's pretty respectable. So this is sending out bursts of a square wave basically, and the more fine, or the better you can see fine lines as it goes across the screen, the better your bandwidth is. If you can see line separation on the far side where it has the finest lines, you've got pretty good bandwidth. You can turn them off on this tester as well. So, the farthest one is kind of off the screen, but this guy, this is the 4 megahertz bandwidth, and we can see separation there, meaning we've got pretty good bandwidth on this set out to 4 megahertz. So that is about it with setting up the picture. Still got to figure out where that interference is coming from. It kind of seems to come and go. It doesn't seem so bad right now. Let's try it out with a broadcast image.
Lose up to 18 pounds and 8 inches overall in your first month. Check us out today and get protein.
Well, before anybody says the image is backwards, that's because you're looking in a mirror right now, as am I. I do not have the yoke hooked up backwards. Something else I don't think I mentioned, you should leave the set running like a good 15 minutes before you bother making any adjustments. Tweaking the fine tuning here a bit. Contrast. I get a lousy reception down here in the basement, so bear with me as I try to get some reception. I do have some new ATSC antennas on order. We'll see if they improve things at all.
Major repairs. Grandview is the fastest and easiest way to sell your home. So listing your home with real estate agents.
So one thing left, I want to see if I can reduce that buzz a bit.
Because we buy your home on the day you choose to move on. I can share countless stories of families who had it difficult to sell and were so stressed they didn't even know where to begin. With Grandview,
the picture's looking really good.
Contact us for a brief and private appointment at your home, then get your fair cash offer in as little as 24 hours.
Picture tubes can get pretty darn bright too. So I think this set has some life left.
We buy every home as is. No need to do any repairs, not even any cleanup. Leave the stress and the mess to us. Call the number on your screen or visit us at grandviewhomes.com.
So here's that sound transformer. There's 2 cores. The top is hollow and you can go down through it with a hex tool like so. And there is another coil, I believe it's this guy. So this and the bottom of this are the first and second sound IF. The top is a ratio detector. That's what they call the buzz control. There's a few ways to do this. You can do it with a VTVM and a 4.5 megahertz source, which this can provide. Or you can do it with a scope, or in the service info they say you can do it by ear, which I'm going to demonstrate here, but it's not really the best way to do it. And they mean just the top core. If you're using test equipment and a 4.5 megahertz signal, this is where you'd set it for the null point. This is frequency modulation. That's the 0 crossover point. Well, let's give it a whirl doing it by ear and see what we can get. Sometimes you can only do so much because the modern broadcast signal is a little different than it was back in the day. Turn that down so YouTube doesn't bust me. So over the years, the ratio, the strength of the video to audio carrier has changed. Audio carrier, I believe, used to be much stronger than it is in a more modern signal. So you got to put more gain to get for the audio on an older set, which can lead to, I think, some of the video bleeding over. I mean, I'm sure you've seen on commercials on old black and white TVs when they have really harsh black and white lettering along the bottom and you hear buzz in the audio. I think that's what's happening. Sometimes if you adjust the fine tuning so you go off the ideal picture a little bit, you can minimize it. But sometimes you just have to live with it. But when you're watching regular broadcast, you really shouldn't have much of a buzz. Alright, let's see what we can do. Okay, now I've definitely gone way off because I can't hear anything. Both the audio and the buzz are getting louder.
Upstate New York. This is more like upstairs New York.
Better.
I have my farm on my terrace of my penthouse. In the house. Well, it's a place where I live. Sort of the top of the building.
Kind of worse.
Mr. Miller,
Let's go back the other way.
problem. Now, if your wife left you, she must... My wife didn't leave me.
Sweet spot's right around here.
I just wanted to ask you what you think I ought to plant. Now, let's see.
It might be as good as it's going to get.
One thing you're going to have to do is run a plow through all this stuff. You got a tractor? Oh, yes. Mr. Haney threw one in with a plow.
Fine-tuning a little bit.
Well, I'll give you the address of a place where you can rent one.
It's not too bad. A little bit of buzz. And sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Also, again, it could be lead dress. I still have to mount these controls.
I guess we can do that. Can't we? You got a line?
Also, need to make sure I have shields on all the tubes. I think I do.
No, we got an automatic irrigator.
It's definitely better than it was.
The one in the middle. No, we don't have a lime spreader. Well, I'll lend you mine. But I suggest you get in touch with the county agent. Let him tell you what you ought to do.
I did a little more work on the sound coil, and the buzz seems to be completely gone now. And so is the interference. I think with the proper dress lead and mounting those controls on the side, buttoning everything up, that took care of the interference. So I'm sorry for the long, drawn-out drama with this set, but I think in the end the results speak for themselves. Plus, I wanted to give you some idea of how finicky these sets can be and what a pain it can be to get that final touch, that final last step on a set, and how to deal with all the issues of these 50 sets with the decomposing yoke covers and cheap CRT sockets and so on. And here's a look with a little bit of lighting so you can see how much better it looks with the cleaned safety glass and cleaned up knobs. So that is finally going to be it for this Admiral 21-inch black and white set from around 1956. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, you're working on the plans, Cut. Where'd you come from? Yes.
Mr. Douglas, have you seen...
Oh, there you are.
Now, how did you get out of that truck?
I wonder.
Oh, Mr. Douglas, I told you I just can't keep her away from...